Well, here we are, a recorded team meeting that we might turn into a podcast or video.
Do you guys want me to put on a button up?
No, you're fine. You're great. Like you just got out of the gym. It's cool. We all work from home.
I think it's a nice enough t-shirt.
Yeah, it's a Patagonia. It's Capilene.
Mm-hmm.
Lightweight.
Well, so who knows how this will go? I think that it's just relax and let's chat about real estate, do our normal weekly meeting, and maybe talk about some interesting topics. And today is July 30th, so we're at the end of July 2020, in the middle, or maybe the middle of the COVID epidemic still going on. And yeah, let's just talk about real estate. What's going on with you guys?
Just, I don't know, really busy trying to handle all of your deals. So I can't even imagine how you're feeling.
Yeah, I feel great. It's a little busy, and we're right in the middle of negotiating 2 more deals that maybe will be going under contract soon, we hope. Yeah, great clients. I don't know, I have no complaints other than it's different.
Yeah. I mean, North Street's been fun.
Yeah, you have a deal closing in what, 3 days? 4 days?
Yep. My first one.
That sounds a little fun and chaotic.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's been a wild ride with them for sure. So I thank God Osmond's the master negotiator extraordinaire. So
yeah,
he lives and breathes it.
We got lucky, and we also are riding on the experiences we've had with that agent with other deals. Partially that's due to Sophie's involvement in those other deals. So I should mention some ground rules. These are currently active deals that are just under contract, so we're not going to mention client names or addresses for active deals. Otherwise I've got to bleep it out because we're not allowed to talk about active deals per real estate rules. Yeah, we're talking about a deal in just south of Newlands, or the southern end of Newlands, and it was a pretty fierce bidding war for, and 2 virtually identical offers that waived almost every possible contingency you could waive. Waived everything as close as you can get to, here, take my money. And there were just 2 distinguishing characteristics between the 2 offers. One started higher, that was our offer, and we have a track record with this agent, partially based on Sophie's involvement in a deal a couple of years ago that left a really positive, memory of how we do business and how we handle things. And the other agent was from Denver and had 0 track record in our local market and didn't do anything apparently to establish that track record. So between those 2 deals, they went with ours. So it came down to reputation, and it came down to a slightly higher starting price, but both deals had, escalations that were that didn't have limits, which how do you deal with? Anyway, it went as best as it could. So yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I could help.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
2 years ago, Sophie, helping you now.
You could foresee the future, I can tell.
No, that's true. It is really all about relationships and what you have pre-established and trust. Yeah.
And I mean, reputations take so long to build, and they're so easily destroyed. But once you have one, they dramatically help your clients when it comes down to extremely low inventory and well-qualified, affluent buyers that all want the same limited house. There's only one of them. So.
But Boulder County didn't it break a record though? You said like 500 deals or something like that?
I think I was writing about 500 deals this month in a blog post.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a record. It's just that there are hundreds of deals every month that close. We can't talk about all of them. We talk about a few of them. Sophie, what about how many offers did you get on that deal you didn't get it. It was you can probably, I guess you can't talk about what the address was because it is still not closed, but it was in Longmont.
Yeah, I don't think it's closed yet. It's in Southmore Park though, which is it's transformed dramatically. I've done a few deals there and close by, just north of Prospect across Pike there. But the listing agent told me they got 15 offers, and this was a very dated, advertised as a tri-level, but I believe it actually had like the 4th basement level, so it just keeps going down. You know what I mean? You go down into the lower, like 3rd level, and then there's another level below that. But they got 15 offers, yeah, for like a fairly dated tri-level priced at, 4-level priced at $375. And I'm seeing all of my entry-level buyers under 600,000 in Denver and Boulder and Longmont, Boulder County for that matter. Just everything is on fire. It's like everything priced accurately, marketed well, for the most part, is moving within a week and going under contract.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even yesterday, I have a client looking in Denver under like 520 for ideally something detached somewhere in Northwest Denver. And she was like, yesterday texting me about, or 2 days ago texting me about a very cute historic 2-bed 1-bath duplex, which are very small and very limiting, but they're nice in Denver because you get a yard and you get a lot more for your money, and you get an attached garage or a detached shared garage often. Like that's the way they're set up. But I was like, oh great, you're interested in duplexes, I'll take a look and see if there's anything else. Literally nothing. Like everything is gone. So yeah, it's crazy. It's very chaotic. I feel like we're definitely experiencing our spring market now in June and July. It's been very hectic. Just the way COVID put everything on hold, it all just sort of got bumped out. So yeah, it's really challenging for all these buyers, but I'm just doing my best to have their backs and find anything, you know, off, like coming up and off market that I can, and support them. Yeah. And a few of them are out of town, so that makes it even more fun.
Right. Yeah. When they're relocating here and there's challenges to seeing the house. Yeah.
For sure. And with COVID, like flying in, that kind of thing, it's not traditionally done this game, but I also don't personally want people to buy something sight unseen unless they absolutely have to. But this sort of market and the way things are moving and those price points it just puts a lot of pressure on you, whether you like it or not. Yeah, but it's been fun. It's been a fun summer navigating all that.
It's been very intense to be working on.
So then how do you think August is going to go, since like COVID's clearly not going away and people are still fleeing the city, it seems like, for like the mountains and everything? Do you see it slowing down at all?
So the normal cycle is the market reaches its bottom in December and then starts to pick up in January. And then inventory usually peaks in June or July, and market activity usually peaks in May or June. So about 30 days prior to closings peaking is when the market is most active. And that means the most buyers relative to the amount of inventory. And this year we had 2 months of basically shutdown. And some deals happened, but they were few and far between. And a lot of buyers were on the sidelines. A lot of sellers didn't list, held off. And then there was kind of that champagne cork effect in June and July, where it really got super busy. And I had a record number of deals personally going on at once. I don't know if you guys did too, but it was a lot of deals happening at once and a lot of crazy activity. And then now I feel like it should be cooling, but we'll see. I mean, I guess the story I would tell to fit the data is people don't casually decide to buy a house and move. They make these decisions well in advance. And so a lot of people had a go or no go decision maybe in March, April, and May. And those that were going to go, I suspect, went or are in the process of going. And now I think we're going to still see a cooling. I don't think we'll see an August higher than July, but who really knows? I've coached my sellers that traditionally it cools, and let's make sure we're pricing right. And for sellers that are either at the higher end of the market and with a luxury home, that is somewhat unique, or that have other factors. Like there's a property we manage on 39th Street, and the owner said, I'd be interested in selling it. Do you think we should do it now? Well, the problem is that it's a basic entry level house. That's great. So there's a lot of buyers for that house, but it's occupied by a tenant till the end of June of 2021. So that takes out the vast majority of buyers who can only do 60 days post-closing occupancy. There are options, like we could incentivize the tenant to leave early. But it just makes sense to wait. Why deal with the fall market that's traditionally a buyer's market, at least more so a buyer's market? We negotiate our best deals in the fall. I love the fall for buyers. For sellers, bringing a property to market, you really should think about maybe waiting until next year. Mm-hmm. But life happens, and maybe you want to buy that condo in the mountains or that property in the mountains now, and you want to get rid of your rental property to fund it now. You don't want to wait because life doesn't wait for you. So there are properties that come to market year round. There's deals that happen year round, but we should be past the peak at this point. That's the short answer.
Short answer.
Hopefully relatively concise.
I feel like with jobs and with school up in the air, they're not gonna cool quite as fast as they typically would in a typical year, just because so many parents are refusing to send their kids to school. They're going remote regardless. I don't necessarily think they want to move at this time of year in August, but I think that is going to allow a little bit more flexibility in a timeline that would normally be very cut off for the majority of buyers. Right. Needing to move and close by August. I think there's going to be a little more flexibility around that, just with the way things have become remote. So that'll be interesting to see. But I don't know if it's going to bleed into September, October. That I doubt. I just think it's going to take a second to cool through August. That's just personally what I'm seeing. Who knows? We'll see.
Do you know what DPS's plan is for reopening schools?
The Denver public schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Denver public schools. Last night I was reading an article, and it said, I believe in October they're going to be remote till October, and then sort of reassess then. So that's something that's good, because I have friends who are teachers who are very worried about what the situation will be, and frankly very uncomfortable to go back into a classroom.
Yeah, I mean, kids are cesspools of germs anyways. So
exactly, and we're lying to ourselves we're lying to ourselves if we say that kids aren't gonna hug each other and love on each other. No, sweet kids, social distancing. So many, sure, if they're old enough, but a lot of them, I don't know, I think are too young to understand the concept, truly, with their friends, maybe with adults, maybe when the parents are around, but it's how much can the parents actually cement this in their heads from March until now? What is it going to be like in schools? And
well, I mean, even some adults are having difficulty accepting it. So
we can only imagine. Yeah, I always try to give kids the benefit of the doubt, but they're young and they're learning and they're excited and they want to be around their friends, and I think playing with your friends from 6 feet is a whole different thing. It's a whole different thing. So
well, BVS. Have you heard about BVSD's plan?
No.
So
what is it?
The current plan is they're going to split kids into two groups, Group A and Group B. Then Group A is Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, and Group B is Thursday, Friday, and then they're going to clean, which means that Group B gets Group A's germs in the dirty building, and I wouldn't want to be in Group B if you were sending your kids in. I think you're right. The result, and I mean, that's what the current proposal is. I don't know if that's what they're actually going to do, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think Monday was going to be teacher prep day, but that still means so that you've got your kids home 3 days a week. And from a real estate perspective, the need for home offices and separate spaces is not going away. And I suspect a lot of people have finally reached this conclusion. This is normal now. We've reached the new normal. We live in masks. We try to limit interaction. And, it may just be safer to keep your kid at home, especially if your kid's going to go to school and bring COVID back to potentially infect grandparents and parents, or immunocompromised children, other children at home, or parents at home. The risks, if you have any sort of pre-existing condition, are so high. And then you have the normal germophobia people like me that are oh, why don't we just homeschool? Not that I've got kids, but I can see that conversation happening. That's just, we're used to it at this point. let's just keep the kids home for another year, and we'll do a better job than the public schools anyway, and we don't have to be in constant fear of shutdown and disruption. We'll have a more consistent childhood experience for them if we don't give them something and then just take it away, because it's likely they're going to shut it down. I mean, you saw what happened with the Marlins, right?
Yeah.
There's maybe you
They
could
like
talk.
get to the second inning and then all of them just like pass out from COVID. It was great. Like it was so quick. Like obviously that would happen.
I mean, if you can't handle it with sports teams, how are we going to, with billions of dollars of resources, how are we going to handle it with public schools and everyday parents that work at home and work for it?
These horribly underfunded schools and systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kids that just want to touch each other. Like adults can separate, but kids are not going to listen. They're just going to be like, whatever. Yeah. So yeah, there's a good thesis out there that we're going to continue to see a lot of activity in August and September as parents realize this is new normal, and this small house without a backyard isn't going to work, or this neighborhood isn't going to work. And I don't know. I always, after 9/11, I felt like that event caused, the deaths involved and the trauma involved caused a lot of people, including myself, to make big life decisions. Like stop putting off the decision that you were putting off before because you recognize your own mortality. And so you're like, I'm making this decision now. I'm not waiting to live. And that means people are moving and their jobs are mobile, right? So many people are work from home. Most people, well, not most people, but most people that would be buying and selling, and I would say a large percentage of people buying and selling in Boulder are going to be completely mobile and can work from anywhere.
Same in Denver, absolutely. And Colorado had the highest rate of mobile workers and work from homers before COVID too. I sent you guys that article. And that was tracked from like 2017 through 2019 through this year. With everyone coming, it's one of the best states to be. And there's still room for a little while. They're still coming.
It's such a funny thing, that whole migration pattern. I've seen, once you're here, people are like, shut the door, but you're an immigrant here too. So what are you talking about? Yeah.
It's true.
I know. I feel like all of
go back to California, and they just came here 2 years ago, 5 years ago. The irony.
A good spot.
Well, the two of you are natives, right? You both were born here in Colorado. So I'm the migrant one, originally from New York, but and from Massachusetts was the last place I lived.
Yeah, I don't.
Truly,
it's hard to
be
meet
bitter about it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say I'm necessarily bitter at all, because like people who come to Colorado like don't come here to, whatever, like drive their yachts and everything. Like they come here for the outdoors. So that's okay with me. I feel like they're very like-minded people, but it's hard to find a group of people that you like just meet where one of them is from Colorado. It's weird.
It's becoming very rare. Yeah. But I think it's, for the most part, good change, because it's driven by, gentrification, of course, has very good and bad extremes, but I think it's driven by lifestyle. And most people want to be in the outdoors, and they're realizing, especially now with all the deurbanization, like quality of life, why wait to do that thing? Why wait to buy that mountain property? Like, why wait to get out of the city that's been draining you and making you miserable for years? Like, there's no better time, to reassess your life. I think that's been interesting to see in clients too.
Yeah. Well, what about detached versus attached right now in Denver? Is it still pretty, like, just properties are sitting?
It depends on the price point. It's all price point driven. Where I start to see a lot of slowing in the detached market is anywhere above like 1.3, 1.4. It's much more common to see like anywhere from 2 to 5 months on market. Generally, once you like sort of like break into that high end, because what you can get in Denver for 1.3 is like a stunning detached luxury new build.
Yeah.
Versus Boulder, good luck. you know,
Yeah.
maybe you can get a somewhat updated bi-level in Table Mesa with a great yard with views, and that
Yeah.
works. Or maybe you get a rare 2-story and that works for your family, and hell yeah, like, but
Yeah.
good luck in that, potential bidding war, etc.
Yeah. With a carport, hopefully.
With a carport. Yeah. So they're just a lot more functional than something like that in Denver, just because we have the space and there's so many neighborhoods and things. So I mean, under 600 again is like where I see the most movement in like the detached price points, because I just think that's what like the majority of especially first time buyers can afford. But above 1.3, above 1.4, there's a lot more flexibility and just way more inventory. But a lot of my buyers again are in that $500,000 to $600,000 range, and they're getting priced out. You know, they're having to look. I have a buyer now who wants to be in Northwest Denver, and I'm having her look slightly west of Sheridan, like into Edgewater and into Wheat Ridge and all these areas that have done historically phenomenally, but are also growing like crazy. But it's insane. Like in Denver, it's so interesting because if you go 3 blocks north or south, or typically not west, but the west is like the general rule against that because mountain proximity. But I mean, I guess if you like get out of Sloan's Lake, for example, and go into Edgewater, you're immediately looking at prices that are like $30,000 to $40,000 less. And sure, the neighborhood is slightly less charming, but like these are the areas that are like sort of on the up and up where I see everyone moving out for affordability. So it's the same thing that happens in like any growing city, but I'm just seeing the whole metro area expand. So there's a lot of potential there. In fact, today I'm going at 1:30 to preview a property in Edgewater that is priced at $475. That if it was literally on the other side of Sheridan in the West Highlands, would easily be at least 500, I'd say, for a 3-bed, 2-bath ranch on a decent sized lot. Like, so it's very interesting, like those kind of things. But like that said, there's still the same amount of demand if the price point's lower, even if the location is slightly worse. Like that's the trade-off. But yeah, it's been interesting to see that change. My mom's partner, so like sort of my father-in-law, he owned a house in Edgewater really close to Casa Bonita on the West Colfax corridor, which has absolutely exploded. I was showing homes over there yesterday.
It has?
Absolutely. It is.
I had no
full
idea.
of new construction. It's used to be really seedy, and it's getting a lot better. It's getting a lot safer. Same with East Colfax over by me. Like it's lots of new eateries and bars and local businesses and like things that will hopefully survive COVID. We'll see. But he bought a house for the low 200s and like near Casa Bonita and Edgewater, like not that far from Sloan's Lake, not far from downtown Denver. Low 200s, maybe 10 years ago, and it's now worth about 6.
Wow.
And that's how much like Edgewater is changing, for example. Like same with Arvada, Wheat Ridge, like that whole like western corridor. So that's where I'm seeing like the most potential, I'd say, versus like, East Denver, super far South Denver, that kind of thing. But I think like so many buyers are coming here and wanting to be in that like western corridor. If they can't afford Boulder County, right, they'll start like looking south. Like then they ask, oh, what about Golden, Sophie? And it's equally as expensive. Like, it's not quite as much as Boulder, but it's still very pricey. So you're having more people like in Lakewood and like sort of that like western corridor, because the mountain access is phenomenal, and you can hop on 6th or 285 or 70 and like be skiing in an hour and a half or less, like an hour and 15 minutes. So it's
a lot of the clients I have that consider that option end up weighing the car dependent lifestyle that comes from kind of being out in the suburbs. Like you get so much more house, and some of those areas aren't suburb, but they definitely are not sort of the core downtown areas that are walkable. And so they have to weigh that for themselves. What do they value more? Upside potential and an improving neighborhood, and then being potentially car dependent, or do they prefer to be closer to downtown in a far inferior house? I mean, you're for the dollar, for what you'll spend on any dollar point, the houses are so much better in the locations you really most people want to be in. But then life needs change. I mean, your family could be expanding. You could have family moving in that, parents that might be moving in. And so all of those things change, and then your priorities change. And you're like, maybe it's not such a bad thing to be in the car every now and then, especially now that everyone's like, what commute?
Especially now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this year more than ever, I'm seeing people care less about amenities and what's nearby, which is crazy because it's always been the opposite. It's always been like, this is the trade-off to be in the urban, dense, walkable, bikeable, amenity-driven like lifestyle area versus like the appeal for a yard, I feel like, is through the roof, or for a detached, property. But I think that will change, and I think it will eventually go back to more amenity-driven. If it takes 3 or 4 years, I think there'll still be a big demand on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Based on what we know about COVID and this disease progression and other past pandemics, it's not forever. Humanity will adapt, and maybe there'll be a vaccine, or maybe there'll be effective treatment. But ultimately, we're social beings. We can't, the children aren't the only ones that want to hug and be close to each other. I was looking at photos today of Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, and she posted all these photos on her Instagram of the things she's been doing this week, which is kind of neat to see her doing Instagram stories. And there's just people everywhere connected, and it looks so strange. I'm like, what is this photo of 50 people in a room with nobody wearing masks really close together? Well, they don't have this issue in New Zealand. And eventually we won't here too. It's just the question is when. So that's what I've been thinking about too, is that with the inflated inventory of attached dwellings, maybe now, I guess 40% higher than normal it's 40% higher than average in Boulder right now, and it's even higher in Denver. I'm going to put together the stats for you soon, so basically you can look at those. But the last time I did it 2 months ago, it was shockingly higher in Denver compared to average. And that, when you see that sort of inflation in inventory, and then we're moving into the fall, that's like a good opportunity to potentially negotiate a pretty good deal. The question in the investment community is always, well, there's a saying, don't try to catch a falling dagger, right? I mean, that's more about stock trading that can see large fluctuations in short periods of time. Real estate's sticky on the downside. So I guess it's sort of like decide, right? Are you a doom and gloom person and think that this is forever downturn, or are you going to look at this as an opportunity to maybe have better selection than you've had in years, and maybe negotiate a better deal than you would have in years for attached dwellings, townhomes and condos? If you're trying to buy a house, though, especially under 600, but even frankly, at all price points in Boulder, but under 600 Boulder County or Denver, I think you're going to see a lot of competition. But I do want to add one piece, in that within that under 600 category, I'm seeing some interesting market behavior. Like, buyers play herd ball. So everyone kind of fixates on the new listing that's really cool. And if there was another listing that happened to hit the market at roughly the same time that wasn't quite as cool, that listing might end up sitting for a few weeks, because all of the buyer attention it's sort of myopic. It's short-term attention deficit buyer behavior, and they miss out on opportunities. Like, our listing on Marigold is absolutely priced right. We went through it again to make sure, because it's been on the market now 2 weeks, and we just went through it with the seller. I went through it with the seller 2 days ago. There's nothing even remotely worth buying that's not already under contract at this price point. You have to go up about at least 50, which is roughly 10% higher, to find something that's a better house. So we're anticipating an offer. And the last one, I just talked to an agent yesterday. We spent about 20 minutes on the phone, because she she emailed me, I'm writing an offer. And this is like on a Wednesday or Thursday night. I'm like, great. And then it didn't happen. And I'm like, well, what happened? So I wanted to get the story. And what happened was, as she's writing the offer, she got an email from the buyers that their dream home hit the market, and they really wanted to go see it. And so she rushed.
I talked to her.
Yeah, they rushed to go see this house, and
please try a little later.
I turned her off, but continue.
And this house that they ended up writing an offer and getting had a whole bunch of offers on it, multi-party, and it backed to open space. It was a ranch that backed to open space, even though it was ridiculously dated. That's what they really wanted. Mm-hmm. So they didn't write on Marigold, which is really funny, because it's a great house. So I'm a little surprised at how buyers can just. I mean, I know they play herd ball, but I'm still surprised by the behavior, because everyone just rushes to that one listing.
Yeah, they fixate for sure for one reason or the other.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't really see the like just because like of the density and like the sheer amount of people in Denver. I don't really see like the Marigold example that's priced well and really lovely, like sitting for a few weeks, not in Denver, not in a desirable area,
Yeah.
not in like that Lafayette equivalent here. I'm not seeing that.
Huh.
But I think that'll change in the fall for sure. I just think it's been a very chaotic year, and the low interest rates I think are pulling out of a lot of renters and a lot of buyers that have been on the sidelines for a long time and that have job security. Like so many of my friends and people's, people in their 20s, 30s are realizing, oh, this is actually doable.
Yeah.
I actually have 3 to 5%, sitting around, and I can pay mortgage insurance, and it's still cheaper, equivalent to my nice rental that I'm paying for.
Yeah.
That's what not enough people realize too.
We just did the math on the house I'm in right now on a refi, and we're going to save almost $500 a month if we refi. And that's phenomenal. Like that is a really shocking number. So we're rushing to get that done.
What's the interest that you'll save on the lifetime of your loan?
Oh, I didn't do
that. Have
that.
You calculated that?
I didn't.
So yeah, Hillary and I, my partner and I, refinanced last September because we had bought our house almost 2 years ago for 4.5 was our interest rate, and we came down to 3.5, and it's 130 on a monthly. It's like $200-$300. It's still significant. It's still really nice. But over the lifetime of our 30-year fixed mortgage, we're going to save $136,000 in interest, which is significant money, and it pays for itself. So it breaks even with the closing costs of the refi in 1 year.
Yep.
And that's a no-brainer. So we're almost there for it paying for itself, but it also resets everything. So that's what people don't talk about. Yeah.
So you did a 15-year or just the interest difference?
No, we're on 30.
Okay.
I'd love to be on a 15 one day.
Yeah. Well, so it's fascinating because I often get this question: should I refi or not? And the answer is always, or should I do a 15 or a 30? And the answer is always about what your alternative investments are. That's why the investment. I don't know. Have I ever walked you guys through the investment property model? That's why it has that little thing in the corner, that in the bottom right. It's all about, well, what are your alternatives for this cash? Because if you can make more than your carrying cost, right, for the mortgage by having that cash liquid, you should go for the longer mortgage, or go for, you should, if you have a better use for the cash that generates a higher yield, then go for it. And that it also applies whether you're pulling cash out or not, because real estate interest is deductible, and that changes the game too. It's not a simple answer. It's not as simple as what's the yield, but it's close. Yeah. Well, good for you. I'm glad you refied.
Thank you.
Yeah,
good job. $500 a month is significant for anyone.
Yep.
At any price point. Yeah.
Yeah. It's real money. It's worth it. I mean, it'll cost us a couple $1,000 to do the refi, but yeah.
What's the rate you're getting?
I think the number was 2.9.
Nice.
Yeah. And I know I could probably do it even better if I really, we could go to the internet lenders, and I'm tempted to, because it's a refi. Performance doesn't matter. So I'm going to talk to one of them and see what the deal is. One of our past clients just refied with this internet lender, and it was really simple, like $1,500 in closing costs, and he said they got like 2.7, and that's phenomenal. And they skipped there was no appraisal because of the equity in the house and the price point and the market. So, and supposedly this lender can do it in 2 weeks. I'm like, really? All right. I'm going to have to call. And so I just want to add, for the sake of this video and make it clear to anybody else watching, if you are, and this is something you guys already know, but if you are buying a new property, it's a new mortgage, and if you're doing that, performance really matters, because at the finish line, if the lender screws up the loan approval date or needs more time, the seller's under no obligation to grant either of those to you as a buyer, and can hold you hostage and demand more money. And it's happened to people, or just sell it to another party that offered more. Like in this multi-party, in these multi-party bidding scenarios, when you have 11 or 12 buyers, somebody could write a backup that's significantly higher, incentivizing the seller to terminate the first deal. And that phone call, hey, we need an extra 2 days to close because my lender is not performing, can be, sorry, you can pay us $30,000 or you can walk. because they're under no obligation. So that's where new originations use a local lender that has a track record and rely on your realtor for referrals and shop around within the referrals they're making. But for refis, it doesn't matter because you already own the house. Yeah. All right. Sorry, I just wanted to hit that because it's such a,
No, it's important.
yeah. It's we did a deal recently with Wells Fargo, and I'm naming them because of how badly they performed. Normally, I use the bucket rule, which is don't criticize by name, criticize by category. But they were so bad, I couldn't believe it, and they're so big. I don't think our little podcast is going to have any impact on their business. But
Well, yeah, they've had a few hiccups in their 100-year plus history.
Yeah.
So
they're ridiculous. They were so
Yeah.
bad. Anyway, and the seller luckily was amenable to extensions. There were 2 extensions at closing. And there were various points in the negotiation that were not easy. They were tense and pissed off the seller. He incurred a lot of costs that had to be resolved on inspection. And I think that it was a good thing that the buyer and seller met because they then started treating each other more like human beings and rather than, nameless, faceless opponents over money. And that's probably why they extended without hesitation. But if we hadn't have met the seller, I don't know if he would have. He was annoyed by the fact I got them to pay for exterior refinish and deck repairs and all this other stuff that he didn't want to pay for. So, yeah.
I did a deal with US Bank. Sorry, US Bank. Last year. That was a literal nightmare. And I was a transaction broker and my friend bought my listing and I had to chase them for literally every single thing. And then the closing was delayed by like a week because of them. And they finally show up and they're the most disorganized. Anyway, use a local lender. Trust your agent and use a local lender because it means something. Also, like responsiveness alone, people don't realize how important that is until you're stuck with someone who's unresponsive and unhelpful. And like, the deadlines, contract deadlines we're trying to meet. And if you're chasing your lender, chasing your realtor who's not responding, etc., like it's a lot of added stress that can easily be avoided. For sure.
make a smarter real estate decision. Just saying. Pew, pew, pew.
Wells
air horn. Pew, pew, pew.
Wells played this game with our buyer that I've never seen a lender play before. So we're at the now extended finish line that's been extended, I think it's like 4 days, 3 days. And they couldn't tell us in writing that we had loan approval. And so my buyers made the decision to let the loan approval date elapse, right? Which makes their earnest money hard. Yeah. And supposedly we're closing tomorrow, but Wells refused to give us it in writing that you're approved. And there was nothing we could do at that point. We could have demanded that we extend loan approval again, but my buyers decided to let it go and it closed. But I couldn't believe that they couldn't give us affirmative, you've got loan approval, which every lender I've ever worked with is at least willing to send us an email saying we've got loan approval. Yeah, never again.
Never.
Well, we'll tell our clients the story, but they make the decision on who they want to use.
Yeah. I've worked with some lenders that are local in other states in the past year that actually weren't bad, that I was very worried about, but they were with small banks. And it was clients that had recently relocated and had a very loyal relationship with said lender and wanted to use them. And one was in Virginia and one was in Washington, but they both did a really nice job and it was super refreshing. And I was surprised by that, but because they weren't giant, I think that helped because there was the incentive for those people to care. Specifically, this lender in Washington was one of the most communicative lenders I've ever worked with. And my clients had used her before in Olympia. And so that was refreshing to know that people are doing it on a broad scale. But generally, if they're relocating or whatever, they want to use the Wells or the US Bank or, whatever huge bank. But yeah, then it goes to show local lenders all over are doing well.
Yeah.
And the model is there for service.
Yeah. Well, for sure. And that's how referrals are how people have been added to the list. They came from buyers that said, no, I really want to use this particular lender. And I'm like, okay. And then the lender performed. They did a better rate than they thought they would. They had great communication through the process. And I'm like, okay, they're now on our list because they did good. And hopefully they keep it up. So I've had people being on the list and did a kick-ass job. When I use, be frank about this, I'll use honest language. They crushed it. And they crushed it for the next deal, and they crushed it for the next deal. And then they blew up the fourth deal and fifth deal. I'm like, we're done. Your performance was amazing for a very short period of time, and now for some reason, either you're so busy or you're just not as committed to this as you thought you were. I see the same thing in the real estate community, by the way. There's sometimes new agents. I won't name him because he's in my neighborhood, but he did I won't name him anyway, but he did a great job marketing and growing a business very quickly. But it was unsustainable. His approach to doing it wasn't really authentic, and it burnt him out for whatever reason, and he doesn't do it anymore. He's no longer in the real estate industry as a broker. He's still in the industry, but not as a broker. And I mean, when I saw what he was doing, I'm like, well, that's going to be really hard to do what you're doing consistently and for long periods of time. So whatever you do for marketing, it has to be real and consistent and long periods of time, sustainable. And it wasn't sustainable for him either. So yeah, it happens.
Yeah,
People come on and off the referral list.
Yep. I've had that with lenders too.
Yeah.
They do a great job and then they just like disappear on vacation. And we're under contract.
Right.
So you learn fast.
Speaking of on vacation, when I worked at that investment company in Denver, I'll never forget, we were working on a deal acquiring like a whole portfolio of homes from a builder. It was an entire neighborhood. And we hired a broker that was local to give us a price opinion. And the bottom of his email had him sitting under an umbrella at the beach. It was a beach community. And that email and that photo got distributed to our entire company. Because we were like, check out this guy's signature line, laying at the beach. Because that's what you think he's doing all that. It was really funny. Anyway, I just shared that because I thought that was just
That's funny.
Yeah, working hard on a daiquiri. It's
Right.
perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Here's my opinion of value while I'm sitting on the beach.
A pina colada. It's perfect. Yeah.
That's funny.
Huh. Well, what else is on top of mind for you guys?
Organization was one of my big ones. We sort of hit on that a little bit, but that's just like been coming up in every single client interaction I have, pretty much. I've very de-urbanization and just fleeing cities.
Mm-hmm.
I have clients who are now very good friends who moved from Bushwick, like Bushwick got very hip over like the 10 years, 15 years they lived there. They moved last July, and then we closed in March on they bought a half duplex, like the back of a half duplex with a yard, and like frankly amazing place for the price and what they got, amazing finishes. But I've had such interesting conversations with them because pretty much they're in their late 20s, early 30s, and pretty much all of their friends have fled New York in some form or the other. Like all of their best friends who are still there. Like two of their best friends are literally just on a farm now in Montana. They just got as far away from the city as they possibly could. Especially because like so many of these like millennials are relatively successful and can work remote, so many are in tech. But yeah, so many are coming to Colorado, but just going anywhere they possibly can, because why would you be in like this dense urban area if you can have space, or be in a place like Colorado or even a city like Denver, which is frankly pretty small and pretty quiet comparatively when you're talking about New York or LA or Chicago or these huge urban hubs. But yeah, they're like outside of their old apartment, probably not anymore, but for months it was a mobile mortuary for COVID when Brooklyn was the epicenter. And it's just like, A, so sad, but B, they're just like so glad they got out of there in time and didn't have to, deal with that. I have another friend who lives in New York City who came back to Boulder. He's from Boulder. His parents live in West Arapahoe, and like, why would he stay in Brooklyn if he could come home and be with his parents? But he just paid his lease this entire time because like in order to like he doesn't want to sublet in COVID, and he doesn't want to expose his roommates to someone random, but also like there's no point in going back to New York, taking the risk, flying, he doesn't want to drive from Colorado, moving everything out, like just the amount of work that takes. So I think a lot of people are just continuing their leases and just like, riding them out until they end. And then figuring out what's next. But I think it's really interesting. It's such a shift, like for people my age who are normally all about amenities and walkability, and we want the dense arts and culture and like everything, like, and are okay with the grittiness. But I think now it's really changed, and I think it's fascinating. Like regardless of price point, regardless of age, like anyone that can, well, I guess price points does play into it, because anyone who can move has. Yeah. But even talking with my brother who's in LA, like he's like, do I just stay in LA where I can't really see my friends and I can't really do anything? And he's in the film industry, and his industry is completely shut down. Right. And luckily he's a writer who still has work, but he said at least 50%, 60% of his friends are producers or actors, or like they're working, and their work is ultimately completely shut off. It's like they're probably all gonna go home, like go be with their parents, whoever that is. Or try and buy a house in somewhere random.
Well, the living experience, having lived in Brooklyn and worked in Midtown at a bank, I can tell you, it used to take me an hour to an hour and 20 minutes to get from Brooklyn to where I worked in the city. And the commute experience was not pleasant either. It was really painful and expensive if I had to park a car in Midtown, or if I took public transit, it wasn't a pleasant experience. The vehicles that transport you were beat up quite a bit. I eventually learned the express bus was actually more comfortable than the subway. And I also learned I could bike faster from Brooklyn to my office in Midtown. This is before New York was even bike friendly, so it was like a serious adventure to try to do that. And I did it every now and then. But then moving here, there were a few stops in between. But once I got here, the difference between Denver and New York is night and day in terms of the living experience. It's not nearly as dense. The crime rates are incredibly low in Denver. I think I saw a table recently of how low the crime rate is, and it's like it's not very high at all compared to a lot of other cities where people are moving from. So even moving into the core of Denver is going to be a much more pleasant experience than having lived in Midtown or anywhere in the city. And I heard the same thing from friends, one of whom is a real estate broker in the city, in New York City, that said everyone who could get out got out, period. Which is just, and one of my friends is working there now. She's like, my entire building is empty. I'm on the co-op board, and we've got cameras installed everywhere. So I had the building wire it to my office, or I connected to my home office. So she monitors it like some sort of, I don't know, some sort of futuristic Black Mirror episode. But she's watching, she's like, nobody's coming in and nobody's going out. There's like 2 or 3 other people in this entire building that are currently there. So a lot of people are defaulting on leases in New York City too. I'm not really seeing that extent, although I hear on the Front Range. Although I was talking to the Realtor Housing Association, and they're very concerned with tenants that have stopped paying rent and how to do evictions, and that's where their focus is. Luckily, none of our clients and the properties we don't manage a lot. We do this as a sideline, by the way, for everyone watching this. We do a few of these. Now, nobody has been even late. Which reminds me of 2006 to 2009, when there was a foreclosure crisis across the country. Boulder saw such a low rate of foreclosures, partially, I think, because it's such an affluent and well-educated community, and people have such great jobs, whether they're jobs local or not. So that makes Boulder a bit of a safe haven. Denver maybe a little less so, but certainly still, it's still going to feel refreshing for anybody moving from Chicago or New York City, even into the heart of Denver. Yeah. Hey, one thing I really would like to talk about, and I think we should try to wrap up around an hour. I don't want this to be like a 2-hour podcast for our first one together.
Yeah,
I want to talk about this deal that fell apart in Northwest Longmont, and I'm not going to talk about the address because it's back on the market. But I've been thinking so much about it because it's such a frustrating experience. So I'd like to share that story a little bit. And Sophie, I don't know, you haven't heard much of it, but Britt probably knows all of it. And there were so many things that could have been done before it got to this point that would have kept the deal together. And it fell apart largely because of trust. I think about this, it was just so frustrating. Basically, the seller bought the house a few years prior, and there were cracks in the foundation that were right on the edge. So when I looked around at this house with our buyers, I saw these cracks. I didn't look through the whole foundation. I looked at a few of them, and they looked pretty minor. And that's what I thought they were, but we decided to, and that's, the inspector said, hey, these might be more than minor, so we should get a structural analysis done. And so we did that, and the seller actually paid for it. And it turned out that they aren't minor. It would have cost somewhere between $13,000 and $15,000 to brace the foundation. There was more than an inch of lateral movement. And foundation issues are things that really scare buyers. So, boy, the part though that blew up the deal was that the seller didn't provide their inspection when they bought the house, even though it wasn't that long ago. They claimed to have lost it. Maybe they did. And they also conveniently forgot that they also checked out these cracks and had a structural engineer look at them. And supposedly the structural engineer didn't provide a report, which sounds really strange. And supposedly the structural engineer moved out of state and can't be reached anymore. The one that said, hey, there's no problem. So it created this sense that the seller was hiding something from the beginning. And I contrast that with the closing we had on Hawk Court in Louisville, with those sellers who were our clients and who listened to our advice, which was get the house pre-inspected, fix everything wrong, and provide that as a report. Choose quality contractors, provide the whole thing, like all the things you did to address the inspection issues. And you know what? That engenders trust, and we're going to close at a much higher price, and it's going to be a much smoother deal. And all of that went textbook as expected. It closed like $30,000 over asking. There were multiple offers for the property, and it worked really well. And everyone's incredibly happy, buyers and sellers, with how smoothly everything went, and to the point where they were like, really, how come it's going so smoothly? I'm like, because you engendered trust. You did these things to increase trust. And the opposite happened with that deal in Longmont. After we found the cracks, the listing agent's like, oh yeah, we forgot to mention it. And by the way, she represented that seller on the acquisition. She was the buyer's agent, so she knew too, which means she should have disclosed to us before we wrote the offer, and definitely before we paid for the inspection. So that's a duty for realtors to buyers. We have a proactive duty to disclose latent defects. And what that means is, latent means it's not obvious to the naked eye, and proactive means we don't have to be asked. We're supposed to tell the buyer before we're asked. And she did neither of those things. And after giving it a serious, I mean, our clients really tried and really wanted to buy this house, but after those two things, the undisclosed known issues with the house, and then resistance to addressing it initially, that's where it really fell apart. If they had said, absolutely, we're taking care of it, no problem, we're so sorry. Instead, they hired another structural engineer who had a different opinion, and of course wasn't willing to guarantee anything, versus our person does repairs and guarantees their work and has corrected structural engineers' reports before that were wrong. It just blew up the deal. It was so sad to see. And I've been thinking so much about trust and the hidden ingredient. How do we create more trust and more transparency and visibility? Anyway, I just want to share that story because I think I'm going to write a blog post about it. I think I might do a video about it. It's something that I feel so passionately about, that trust, got to do things that are very clearly increasing trust between buyer and seller, who are spending hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars on these real estate assets. And the moment it feels like the one party, the seller, typically is doing something to hide something, the buyer is like, I'm out of here. The deal becomes so much more difficult.
Yeah. Transparency and trust from the get-go. Like pre-listing inspections have been one of the most effective ways to establish trust from the get-go that I've ever seen. I did that with a property 2 years ago when we did a pre-list inspection, and the buyer paid cash, did like a 2-month post-closing occupancy for free, and waived their inspection entirely because we used a reputable inspection company and they felt no need to do that. And we looked at everything, and it was thorough, and you spend the money up front and it can increase the yield by thousands, right? Like that's why you had such a smooth bidding war and a smooth transaction on Hub Court. And everyone felt great about it. But it's sad that we live in a world where it's like, wow, it's going this smoothly. What's wrong?
What's wrong? Why is it going so smooth?
Why am I
Yeah.
optimistic about life right now?
I know. Why is this going well? It's because so often it doesn't go well for one reason or the
No.
other. But
Definitely not.
trust is one of the biggest things.
Well, and learning
Close
to,
up.
as agents in between buyer and seller, learning to, I don't know, help these two parties communicate well.
Mhm.
And when one party gets emotional, you buffer that. You're not going to go express. When they sell, when they say you tell that SOB he can't have the house at any price, you're like, okay, I'm going to give you a few hours to calm down. And then I'm not telling him that, because that is just completely against your interests. We're just going to hit the pause button for a few hours. And then we're going to circle back on this and say, do you really want me to tell the buyer to go take a hike and they can go at whatever themselves? Like, you don't want to do that. And I just had happy hour with this client who literally wanted to do that 2 years ago. He's a good friend too. It's so funny. It's like, no, we're going to be the buffer for you, so you don't blow things up unnecessarily. Yeah, funny.
This is why you shouldn't sell your house yourself.
Well, it's sort of these hidden roles of things we do that I didn't think this is what realtors did when I got into this business. And this business was never on my radar. And being, coach and mentor and teammate with other realtors like the two of you, which I'm very honored by the way. I'm very thankful for you guys on the team. But that was never my vision for what I was going to be doing professionally. I just stumbled into this 15 years ago, and I'm like, this is interesting.
It is. Every day is interesting and different and new and fun and challenging.
Yeah. Well, this is a fun experiment. I really appreciate you guys being on it. Do you have any thoughts about the experience? Do you have anything you want to kind of close out with? Because we're coming up on an hour.
Oh, really? I think this was nice. I'm excited to see excited, nervous, anxious, scared to see what the rest of the year brings. But we'll see.
Me too.
But
seriously,
very grateful for this team.
Yeah,
I'll end with that.
I'm just loving learning so much. Honestly.
You're learning from a fire hose. I'm just dumping. I'm just like, fire hose at you.
I got a nice
luck,
net
Britt.
though. I got a nice net. It's all good. It's a big net.
Yeah, you're doing a great job.
Awesome.
Well, for this first post, what I'm going to do is I'll put in links to both of I'll put a team link in, Sophie, and I'll put a link into Homes with Soph into the show notes so people can find that easily if they want to talk to you about anything in Denver. Because I usually refer most real estate stuff to Denver to you because you're really focused there. Unless they're past clients and really want me, in which case I'll go to Denver. I'm going to Windsor right now. I've got an offer in a deal in Windsor for a past client. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
This has been fun.